From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Library of Congress and the John Adams Residency, which is brought to us by the Dina Costin and Roger Shapiro Fund for New Music. This is our third evening of 4 nights of splendor musically that have been going on here in DC. And it's been such a privilege to have John to share these special concerts with us all in the DC community. I'm not going to talk too much, but obviously, John Adams, extraordinary composer and conductor and thinker, welcome. John, for those of you that don't know, he was commissioned by the Library of Congress to write road movies, which was played last night at the Atlas by Jenny Ko and Reiko Uchida. And that was a McKim Fund commission. And tonight you're going to be hearing his Son of Chamber Symphony, and John will be conducting the entire program. And then we have the brilliant Claire Chase, who is seated to John's right. Claire is a force in music right now. And she is the nicest, kindest, gentlest person you'll ever meet and has such a great spirit about her. With the International Contemporary Ensemble, she was awarded a MacArthur Genius Grant recently. And to say the least, Claire is a trendsetter internationally with classical music and new music and breaking down boundaries and that type of thing. And I will just turn it over to John and Claire so we can get some dialogue going. Oh, I'm Nick Brown, for those that haven't known me yet. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm sure Sue was sitting back there saying, say your name. Yep, she waved at me. So, John and Claire, can you please tell us a bit about how your collaboration began?
Let's see, what was the first thing we did together?
I think it was mostly Mozart in summer of 2010.
Summer of 2010.
We did Son of Chamber Symphony.
Yeah. I had been asked to do a program, I think Jane Moss, who directs mostly Mozart, and the Lincoln Center Festival, asked me to do a program, and a friend of mine said, there's this amazing group. You will not believe how good they are. And their name is ICE. And I said, okay. Then I found out it was an acronym for International Contemporary Ensemble. And we did a concert in Tully Hall, and it was just stupendous. It was so wonderful to work with them. So the next project that I had was to make a recording of this piece that you'll hear of mine tonight called Son of Chamber Symphony. I wrote an original chamber symphony in 1992, and then about 12 years later or so, I wrote a second chamber symphony. But, you know, Schoenberg wrote a second chamber symphony, but it sort of was not a great success, and he didn't finish it. And so I felt there was some little bad karma connected with the idea of a chamber symphony #2, so I called mine Son of Chamber Symphony, and much to my publisher's chagrin. And ICE performed that, and we made the original None Such recording, and then we've just had a wonderful relationship. I wish it could be closer and more frequent, but I live out in California, so it's always a treat to be able to work with this incredible ensemble.
Well, and for us too, I'm just remembering that when we were in our initial conversations about that program in Tully, we had actually talked about programming Stravinsky and Schoenberg on that concert as well. And then we ended up with a really wonderful program doing Shaker Loops as well as Son of Chamber Symphony. And for us, I mean, imagine, we'd never played at Lincoln Center before. We had never imagined that we would get to be on the same stage as John Adams. We got this phone call and thought, like, what, is this for real? And John very generously and graciously came down to Brooklyn, deep Brooklyn. This is Sunset Park, 43rd and 3rd, eye level with the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, where we have our studio, and rehearsed with us there. And we also, it was one of those, like, is this really happening moments? Like, John Adams just shows up in our studio, we've got people crammed in. You know, I think we had like the piccolo player over near the kitchen and the trumpet player near the bathroom, cramming all these bodies into the space. And it was just, the room was on fire. We just had this electric and immediate love affair musically. And it was really, really great and unusual for the ensemble to have that kind of immediate rapport with a conductor. We just sort of by nature eat conductors alive and hate them.
The ensemble does. It rehearses in a really remote part of Brooklyn, which is just all, you know, warehouses and factory. And to give you an idea how remote it is, I got in a cab the other day and I was not completely awake. And I gave the address, which is 3rd Avenue and 43rd Street. And then I opened up my scores or something. And then I look up and the cab is heading into Manhattan. Because I started the trip from Brooklyn and I said, no, Brooklyn. And the cab driver says, oh, no, you don't want to go there, buddy.
The place was actually, before we moved in, it was occupied by a bounty hunting training program. And ICE actually had the space downstairs that only had about 1,200 square feet, and the space we're currently in has about 3,000 square feet. So the bounty hunters had a big neon sign across the front of the building that said, be a bounty hunter, call 718, blah, 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 to advertise to the people driving on the BQE. So anyway, we kicked the bounty hunters out and the contemporary music band moved in, and then in walks John Adams. It's a dream.
So, I know both of you are big fans of the DC music scene, and I think that's really great, and I think DC really appreciates that. We've had the fortune of having ICE in town. This is the 3rd time this season alone, and this is the first time we get the big full ensemble together. And then, John, you're going to be here as well for the National Symphony next week, and you've worked a lot in DC. What makes the DC music scene unique, in both of your opinions?
Well, I was actually just having a conversation with Zona Hosteller about this afternoon. My sense, and we've only been here a few times, but the place has made a very, very strong impression on me and my colleagues at ICE. My sense is that this place is really buzzing with innovation and with enthusiasm, and there are lots of startups. I mean, I get an email every couple of months from somebody else in DC doing something interesting, and starting up an ensemble or a band or a collective or a composers consortium of some sort. And I think that energy, that vitality is infectious and it's exciting, and it reminds me a lot of what the Chicago scene was about 10 years ago, which really just in the last 5 years has exploded. And it's just, Chicago's absolutely on the map with New York and European cities as far as what's happening internationally in contemporary music. I'm a little biased, but that's my opinion. And my feeling is that DC is really on fire, and I'm excited to see what happens here next. I also really love the idea that there are small organizations and big organizations partnering, and young composers and established composers partnering. You know, the fact that Zosha and John can share the program today, and that ICE could perform a few weeks ago at Atlas a bunch of music that nobody had ever heard of by emerging composers, and then here get a chance to do in this beautiful space masterworks of Stravinsky and Schoenberg and John, is the sign of a really healthy and really diverse environment. That's my take on it.
Well, I've always thought my popularity here was due to my name.
We do have a building named after John, which is part of the Library of Congress just across the street.
You know, I think that the cross section of people here is so extraordinary, and that's why we get such interesting audiences. A fellow came up to me after the first concert the other night and told me that he goes to every concert here and every one that I do. And I asked him about himself. He's a young guy. He's probably mid-30s or so. And he said that he graduated from Princeton with a double major in music and Chinese. And he himself is not Asian. And he works for a federal think tank, spending his entire days reading Chinese newspapers and you know, reporting on them. And then at night, you know, he does music. And I think that there are a lot of people like that in Washington. They're not, you know, lobbyists or Congress people, but they're people, the people here that actually don't leave every 4 years and make this wonderful city what it is. And they're curious. It's a great place to live. I mean, there's just so much going on. Historically, it's the most historical feeling of all the cities in the United States for obvious reasons. And I think there's also, there isn't sort of any attitude about culture here. People realize how important it is. Maybe you're closer to the realization of how endangered culture is here. I don't know, but I mean, people really do have an enthusiasm and an intelligence and a curiosity, which so therefore for people like Claire and me, that this is the kind of place we want to be.
Wonderful. John, now that you've had an opportunity on several occasions to get more familiar with the manuscripts in our music division collections, what can you say about the way that sort of the global history of Western art music, at least, is so concentrated here in the library, and it's not just American music?
You know, it's very awe-inspiring to have an object in your hands. No PDF file or digital copy or perfect high-resolution scan will ever give you the emotional hit that you get from being in the room with an object, which is, the product of some very, very great mind's creativity. And not only manuscripts of musical pieces, but also the personal record. For example, just an hour ago, Nick brought in a box of Leonard Bernstein's sketches for Songfest, which is a piece he composed for the 1976 bicentennial. And it was interesting for me to look at the manuscript and, the short score. It's just sort of a shop talk type of thing. But then underneath it were all these sheets of paper where Bernstein's just figuring out how he's going to, arrange the singers and what the texts mean. He'd written all these kind of very emotional notes to himself about what the piece means. And to have these in a location where you can go, anybody can go and see them. Yesterday, I held in my hands Stravinsky's autograph manuscript to Oedipus Rex and a Beethoven Late String Quartet, Opus 130, and Brahms Violin Concerto autograph, and Appalachian Spring, and what was the other? Oh, there's Survivor from Warsaw by Schoenberg. And I can't really tell you why it was so profoundly affecting to me, but I just feel that there's something very special and to be treasured about this. And, people who now think that libraries are not important and that everything is just going to be digitized and then all the hard copies will be burnt or, recycled or whatever, that's really wrong. It's necessary to keep these wonderful objects.
You gave me a perfect segue, John. So the Library of Congress, of course, as you know, has been a leading institution for digitization going back to the 1990s. And one of the big things that we do is we create webcasts of all of our public programs, such as this talk will be up on the Permanent National Digital Collection, as well as our concerts. And one of the really neat things that ICE has been doing recently is sort of in parallel with our initiatives here at the library, and they have sort of taken the classical music internet by storm with this project called Digitize. And I would love for Claire to tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, I'll preface it by saying that I don't think digital initiatives of the type that you've launched and that I'm going to talk about are in any way in conflict with what John just said, but I think is so powerful that holding that object, and for me sometimes it's more affecting emotionally even to hold the sketch and to see the fragility and the humanity behind something that then became a masterpiece, but to be able to hold that as an object and to honor it as an object is something that I hope, if our digitization efforts are smart and robust enough, the value of that will actually increase, not monetarily, but in terms of its human potential. That's my utopian view of what will happen. But as far as ICE's digitization efforts go, we were really inspired by what the Berlin Philharmonic did several years ago in launching their digital concert hall. And I remember looking at it and wanting to peruse all these incredible performances with the greatest soloists and conductors and the greatest orchestra in the world. And the pass, I think the cheapest pass was like 130 euros. And I thought, this is tragic. How about if we could create this in our American DIY, open source way? We can create something like this for contemporary music that's free and available to everybody. And why don't we just start doing it with whatever means we have available, which at the time were like, iPhones and really not very sophisticated recording and video devices. And the program grew over a very, very short period of time. And we were fortunate to have a new percussionist join the group, Ross Carr, who had just gotten his DMA in percussion as well as an MFA in film. And he said, I'm going to take this on. I think this is a really, really important initiative. Let's set some crazy goals and do 3-camera HD shoots of all ICE performances that we have the licensing ability to do, and make sure that they're available on our website in this space that we created, digitized, within 7 days of each concert. And so, like all ICE ideas, everyone's sitting around the ICE house, usually around a beer, and we say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, let's do it. And then by Monday, we have a program going. So we started this last July. It hasn't even been a full year. And now we've got hundreds of videos up on Digitize, streaming full concerts. There's some excerpts as well and some interviews and behind the scene things, but the idea of the program is let's expose the unedited, raw concert and all of its mistakes. Let's make that available to everyone everywhere. And let's see what happens with our audience, not just for ICE concerts, but for contemporary music and for listenership in general, and for introductions to many of the younger composers we work with who don't yet have big names and big followings. And it's been really, really fun to watch this soar over the last year, and I'm excited to see what will happen in the coming years. I think in 5 years or so, we'll have tens of thousands of films up there.
Awesome. One of the things that's been really fascinating that connects ICE and John Adams is the institutions of ICE and also John's commitments to nurturing this younger generation of composers. And one group of them are based in Brooklyn, and there's a lot of work with those characters. We had Timothy Andres here on Wednesday night. The library had commissioned him based on John's recommendation for a new string quartet. And tonight, the feature of a young composer is on Zosha di Castri. And it's not a premiere. Zosha, is it the DC premiere? Yes, very exciting. So we are hosting the DC premiere of Zosha's La Forma dello Spazio. I'm not pronouncing that perfectly, I apologize. And John, you've worked with Zosha for some time now, and I would like to invite Zosha up and encourage you all to chat together, if that's okay.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So we met at the Banff Center in Alberta, Canada, a couple of years ago. And you are from Alberta, right?
Yeah, that's my home.
You and Katie Lang, right? Yeah, I think
She's Canadian. I'm not sure what province you're in.
Yeah. So I heard this piece. For those of you who don't know what Banff is, it's an arts center that's nestled in this just outrageously beautiful base of the Canadian Rockies, and all kinds of arts happen there, and artists are invited to come and do residencies there, and Zosia was one of a couple of young composers who came at a time when I was there. And I heard this piece, which is a quintet, I believe. It's a flute, clarinet, cello, violin, and piano. And it's about space. It's about sound creating form in space. And what makes it unusual is that the two of the instruments are behind the audience. I know this is not completely new, that composers have been doing this sort of thing since the time of Gabrielli, if not even earlier. But in this particular case, what drew me to the piece was the combination of these bursts, almost like starbursts of glittering virtuosic activity that are abutted against these moments of almost complete frozen time where these very, very subtle changes in color and timbre happen very gradually. And I thought it was really remarkable because, you know, so much new music today treats performers like cogs in a machine, and they count, or they do endless repeats, or you could just tell by looking at their faces that sometimes they're not having a good time. And they said, I went to Juilliard and practiced 20,000 hours to do this. And Zosia really had written a piece that did just the opposite, that really challenged and respected the players. And one of the nicest things that was said to me in the course of the last week was, in the middle of the first rehearsal of his piece, one of the players said, "Hey, who chose this piece?" And I said, "I did." So that was a real vote of confidence. I mean, when musicians, there's another way they can say those same words that you, but fortunately we're saying they're good. Yeah. So could you tell us just a little bit of what was the, what was the first image you had for this piece?
Well, I had been thinking about this idea of sound circulating in space, and I was inspired by these different mobile sculptures that I had seen, some by Lee Bontekoe and also by Calder. And I thought that this was a really beautiful metaphor for music, because often young composers tend to pile in as many ideas as you can for every second of music and try it all out. And I had been trying to think about how I could restrain that a little bit in my music, try to narrow it down and focus on different aspects. And I thought that mobiles do that in an interesting way. They have sort of restricted material that's put into space, and on the one hand it's mobile, so it's moving around. It has a certain flexibility to it, but I like the fact that it also has this sense of axes where they're stuck together, so in some ways it is static. And so I sort of took that as a starting point for composing, trying to choose sort of limited material and find how I could make it sort of revolve around itself.
You asked the woodwind players to do unusual things with their instruments in terms of producing sounds. They're not the kind of sounds that a beginning flute player would do intentionally. Often a beginning flute player or clarinet player might do them by mistake, and the teacher would say, no, don't do that.
Those are some of the best sounds.
But tell us some of the effects, because they're really extraordinary. They're very subtle, and they really at times sound like natural sounds that you'd hear outdoors rather than in a concert hall.
Yeah, some of the sounds sort of mix a normal style of playing with sort of an airy sound, so you get sort of a little bit of interference in the sound. There's a technique for flute players called the jet whistle tone, which you could probably imitate better than I can. Yeah.
It's actually really easy to do.
Sort of just a big burst of air, but I sort of like sounds like that can sort of help launch the momentum in the music. There's some multiphonics, so one player playing more than one note at a time, which is sort of difficult to control. Again, it has sort of a bit of a fragile sound, and they have to know the proper fingering to get that exact thing.
Well, and then there's this beautiful violin solo, too.
Right.
It takes over.
Yeah, the piece sort of features the violinist. And then at the beginning of the piece, the other instruments are almost acting like resonance in the room. So they're sort of holding different notes that the violin plays. So you almost get a sense that the room is singing or humming. You're sort of orchestrating in a reverb that's already sort of there, but it sort of exaggerates it. I have some of the performers hum or sing while they play, you'll notice the pianist has the extra challenge of wearing a percussive anklet, which is surprisingly challenging. Yeah, I'm a pianist myself, and we're used to using the foot like this to press the pedal, but when you have a percussive instrument, you're using your heel, and then you're playing at the same time, so it's a bit of a challenge, but hopefully one that's enjoyable for the players.
Well, it's been amazing for us, and we really have John to thank for introducing us to your music, and we're going to be playing a lot more of it next season, thanks to this introduction. But it's always wonderful when we can make those connections, and so we have you to thank for that.
Thank you.
Zosha was part of a new initiative that was created between the New World Symphony Orchestra in Miami Beach, which was founded by Michael Tilson Thomas, the San Francisco Symphony, which is an orchestra I've had a very long history with, for over 30 years, and the music publisher Boozy and Hawkes, which is the publisher of Stravinsky and Bartók and Benjamin Britten and Steve Reich and many others. And this was a really exciting opportunity because Zosha was commissioned to write two pieces, right? A full-scale orchestra work and then a chamber piece. And Michael Tilson Thomas just did the premiere of the new piece about a month ago. Can you tell us what was that like? I wasn't there, and I'm an old hand at the panic and chaos and anxiety of a first rehearsal of a piece that's never been performed before. What was it like for you, Zosha?
Well, there's a lot of panic and chaos, but mainly in my head. It actually went, especially the orchestra piece went much better than I anticipated it would. You know, when you have that many people on stage and you have to be thinking about everything, there's always in your head a million things that could possibly go wrong. But I was really blown away that the musicians came so prepared and they just read right through it. We didn't even have to stop. I mean, we went back and, of course, cleaned and worked out things, but I was anticipating we'd get, 3 measures in, and we'd say, halt, okay, this is not working. How are we going to do this?
I once wrote about sort of a funny article, advice to young composers, how to survive a first rehearsal. You're sitting out there in this empty hall, and you hear this kind of sonic slurry. It's vaguely, distantly related to what you had written, and usually the conductor is taking the wrong tempo, and there are all these things that go through your mind. The first thing is that if it doesn't sound right, you blame yourself. And of course, you shouldn't, because usually at a first reading, if it's a professional orchestra, not the New World Symphony, nobody's really looked at their parts except maybe the percussionists, because they normally don't have much to do anyway, so they actually take their stuff home and practice it. But then they play too loud, and you can't hear anything else. And the strings are out of tune because they don't know, and the composer has to learn to sit quietly and just deal with his grief. And you don't go up and you don't interrupt the conductor in the middle of the rehearsal, even if he's doing your piece twice too fast or twice too slow. And I've now told composers, bring Post-its. There's nothing like having a Post-it, because instead of writing down notes, because things go by, they talk about your life going by in front of your eyes in 5 minutes. Well, if you've written, let's say, a 15-minute piece, your life goes past in 15 minutes, and you hear all these things, and you know they're wrong, but they're coming so fast, and you just don't have time to write things down. So I just tell them, you just flap that Post-it on every bar where there was a mistake and try to remember. And then you quietly, you choose which battles you can fight with the conductor, and then just very congenially point out that he or she was doing it at twice the wrong tempo. And you know, it is very, the larger the ensemble, the more chaotic the first rehearsal tends to be. But it's an exciting thing. I mean, I don't think I'd want a videotape of the first rehearsal. It can be pretty crazy, but it does remind you that, you know, making music really is a very communal effort. You know, that people are up there and, you know, if you're an instrument player, you're sitting in the middle of the viola section or the trumpet section and you've never heard this piece before. You don't know what it sounds like. And worst of all, you're in the middle of it. So even if you did know what it sounds like, you don't know what's going on because you're stuck in the middle of it. So it's really a very, very complex experience to be in the, you know, witnessing a work coming together.
Well, you know, the sort of trauma that you're describing, I can certainly attest to the performer's side of it too. This is one of the reasons that we at ICE launched this program called ICE Lab, which was our sort of utopian vision for what the composer-performer collaboration could be if we sort of took it from its very raw beginnings and put the composer and the performers in a room together to work out ideas in a kind of playground sandbox environment where, you know, we could have the arguments and the love affairs much earlier on in the process than at that rehearsal when it's, you know, 1.5 orchestral rehearsals away from the premiere. Which, for a chamber ensemble and for a group like ICE, where everybody's a soloist and everybody's got an opinion, and everyone also has an arsenal of ideas. Not all of them are good, not all of them are interesting to the composer, but they're there and they're material. You know, for us, it's always a missed opportunity if we only have 3 rehearsals. Like, we kind of want 6 months of rehearsals. And we want to be able to talk to you when your idea is just at its very nascent green stages. We want to be able to have that conversation with you, try stuff out. We want to be pushed, do things with our instruments that we have not yet done. And ideally, we want to push you to do things that you haven't yet done compositionally. And that leap of faith, we thought if we could put everybody in the same room and actually invest in the creative process in all of its various stages, you know, we could create a different body of repertoire, ultimately. So we started this program called ICE Lab 3 years ago, and we're in the midst of it now, and I'm really pleased to say that Zosha is going to be a part of it next year. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the work that you're imagining, if it's not too soon.
Zosha, just right before we do that, John has to go get ready for the concert, so I'm going to have to ask him to depart.
That's right, I have to work, don't I?
Yes, but then Zosha's going to take it away and be our rock star here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, so ICE Lab, I was extremely excited when I heard that this program existed because it's basically a composer's dream. You want to be able to have access to performers at these different stages and to have a sort of more long-term relationship is something that I've been really wanting with an ensemble, because so often you get sort of plunked down for a concert. You have maybe 1 or 2 rehearsals and then it's showtime. And so you don't really get to know the performers on a personal level. You don't necessarily get to experiment to really get to the stage that you want your ideas to be at. So this is really ideal. And the nice thing also about ICE Lab is that they're really open to interdisciplinary collaborations, and that's something that I've been very interested in. So this next project will definitely involve elements of that. It's also not only a collaboration with ICE, but also another composer, David Adamczyk, so it'll be sort of a shared load, but it'll involve live instruments and also electronics, so music coming from speakers, and potentially large-scale sculpture, which is something I've been investigating lately, and video projection. So it's definitely ambitious. I guess when you're talking about the utopian side of ICE, I'm interested in that. But of course, we'll see what happens over the course of the year. It'll probably change a lot too.
Yeah, I imagine so. And you know, one of the things that is really fun about the program is actually one of its limitations is that every project kind of has its own set budget. And so we don't say, no, it's impossible to do sculpture, it's impossible to do live projection. We just get everybody in a room. We get a bunch of very, very smart, very resourceful, creative people who have big ideas that are not necessarily too expensive. And we figure out how to make them work within limited means. And we look at that as part of the creative process too, and a part of the process that the creator of the work, the composers in this case, the performers, the producers, everyone involved sort of shares that responsibility. And the performers, by the way, are the producers. There isn't really a line there. And so we're really excited to see this new work come into being, and we should bring it to DC the following season.
That'd be fun.
You touched upon this idea of the dual roles of you with ICE and your colleagues, and like Josh in his administrative role for the company. Do you find it difficult to sort of have the two different identities, or is it very organic the way that it sort of flows together?
Well, you know, everything is difficult. Just being a musician is difficult. And just being a producer, I'm sure, is difficult too, although I haven't ever just been a producer. Everything has always come from an artistic impetus. So it's not utopian, and it's not necessarily ever easy, but it is organic, and I think it's also necessary, and it's certainly necessary in our generation, because we graduated into a field with no jobs. And so what were we going to do, cry on our pillows? No, we created a bunch of jobs. We shared resources and made interesting new business models happen. And so we have, by default, become entrepreneurs. And we're realizing that that's also a lot of fun. And that historically it's a very interesting moment, because the line between the artist and the producer, it's not even that that line is blurring. In many cases, it's ceasing to exist. And we're creating work, like with someone like Zosha, from a place at which those barriers are just not even, they're not even barriers. We're making our work, and we're deciding where it's played and how it's played, how it's funded, how it's going to be presented, how we're going to market it, how we're going to talk about it, how we're going to connect it to our education program. We as artists are making all those decisions. And yes, those are really hard decisions. It's not an easy task, but they're really exciting and empowering. And especially when we can do it together in a group, we feel very privileged.
Awesome. For me, it's such a treat to sit up here with both of you. You're just such wonderful people, and there's such a great creative energy with both of you. And I would like to give you all an opportunity to ask Zosha and Claire some questions for a couple minutes before we have to go. If you do have a question, if you could just raise your arm pretty high, and my colleague Jay will run around with a microphone. It's very important that you wait till you have a microphone, because someone 200 years from now wants to hear your question. Anybody? I'm going to start picking on people.
I think you scared them by saying that it's going to be mortal.
Yes. Here we go.
Hi. First time hearing your group perform. I wanted to ask about your audience. Did it exist when you started doing what you do, or did you create your audience? Who comes to your concerts? How do they react?
Many different questions. In the beginning, no, we did not have an audience. We had to create it. I started the group in Chicago in the 2002-2003 season, and we had a budget of exactly $603 for our first event. So not a lot of marketing money there. And the fees were really generous, you can imagine. Everybody did it for the love of it. And we made the concert free. And I remember talking to a mentor, a teacher of mine at the time, and she said, it's a terrible idea. You know, you're so broke. Why don't you charge admission? I said, well, who's going to pay to hear a group of people they've never heard of before play a bunch of really weird music in a really weird place at a really weird time? I was going to do that. I mean, I wouldn't do that. And so we just decided to make it free and open to the public. And we didn't have money to even run off flyers. So we just sent emails. This was before social media, really. I mean, there was no Facebook at the time. So we got 350 people, standing room only. We broke the fire code at this little place, the 3 Arts Club of Chicago. And we just decided to create a scene. That was our first concert, and we said, okay, if this can happen on a budget of essentially nothing, what could we do if we had, a sort of grown-up budget? So we raised $10,000 through mostly very modest donations. I think our largest donation that year was about $75. So it was $5, $10, $15, $20, hundreds of people giving us what they could. And we produced a festival of free concerts and also a bunch of really weird venues. We played a bunch of really weird music. We commissioned site-specific premieres by young Chicago composers. And we did a week of concerts, all free and open to the public. And again, like, everything was packed because people couldn't ignore what we were doing. They didn't like it necessarily, but they were talking about it, and we invited them in to talk about it. And we had booze after every concert and turned every environment into a salon of sorts, you know. And you can locate this all throughout music and literary history, these kinds of gatherings. So in the beginning, that's how we built it. And you know, now we have a marketing strategy and we have a budget, and you know, we can pay our rent and we have jobs and things like that. But in many ways, our strategy is still the same, in the sense that we don't define our audience. Our audience is anybody that we could possibly touch, anybody who has streamed a video, anybody that we could imagine sharing this wonderful and crazy new music with. And we think of it as limitless, like the ICE audience, and I think the contemporary music audience in general. We don't have to look at it as this pool that we are trying to recruit or trying to bring into our fold, or you know, trying to carve out this sector of. No, it's anybody. It's anybody who has an open mind, and that's a lot of people if you open the playing field like that.
Any other questions? We have time for one more. All of you regular patrons, I'm going to start picking on you because I know you have good questions when you find me in the hallway.
Well, I have a question.
Oh, shoot.
I have a question for Zosha. How does it feel to be on a program with John Adams and Arnold Schoenberg and Igor Stravinsky?
Kind of pinching myself to know when I'm going to wake up. No, it's very exciting. It's, I mean, they're all people I admire greatly, and it's wonderful to have to feel that, you know, maybe this is a possibility to have your music played by wonderful performers and conducted by somebody like John Adams, and have it share the stage with these other wonderful works of music. It's really inspiring and encouraging, and a sign that I feel things are moving in the right direction, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's so interesting that this program is, you know, it's anchored by Stravinsky and Schoenberg, who are, of course, famous enemies. And it's not unusual at all for Stravinsky and Schoenberg to be programmed together in a single concert now. But, you know, there was a time when that would have been unthinkable, that you were either in the Stravinsky camp or you were in the Schoenberg camp. And you couldn't possibly have them in the same room. And I think also it's a sign that we've given up, I hope, on the uptown-downtown dichotomy and these other cultural wars that we get into with one another within the classical music field that it's just not productive. I mean, Stravinsky and Schoenberg used to be buddies. They like really admired each other until they had that rift in 1923. And imagine if they had stayed friends, or if they'd been programmed on a concert together, or if they had managed to get over their egotistical battles, how music history might have changed.
That's an amazing morsel to think about for like the next 20 years.
Stravinsky might have experimented with atonal music. Schoenberg might have adopted neoclassicism as he was, you know, rearranging and studying Brahms. You never know. But that dialogue never existed after their rift, and I think it's a tragedy.
It is much more open these days. I think people are shifting, and you're seeing concerts that aren't just programming one aesthetic of music. I think that's really healthy and nice to see.
Yeah.
The fun proof of the pudding with this is that the huge amount of manuscripts for Schoenberg and Stravinsky that we have at the library all live in the same room together, within, you know, a couple feet and inches in some cases. So they can't escape each other for eternity. It's pretty great.
They probably tremble at night.
Well, probably. Wonderful. Well, on behalf of the Library of Congress, I want to thank Claire and Zosha and John also for chatting with us. And also a huge thank you to all of you on behalf of the Music Division and the library as a whole, because we don't exist without you. We are here to serve you in your cultural tastes and desires, and hopefully here to introduce you to some new things. And we really have appreciated your support all season long, and for years and years and years for many of you. And for those that are new to our audience tonight, please take something away from tonight. I hope that you've had a question come to mind, at least for your own thought, in our talk this evening, and I'm sure the concert is going to inspire some more machinations of the brain and such. So without further ado, we're going to depart here and give you a bit of a break before the concert, and thank you so much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.